This video is brought to you by Brilliant. It might surprise you to know that in this age of air travel, maritime shipping is responsible for the carriage of roughly 90% of world trade. Maritime trade routes crisscross oceans and connect continents, but in a number of places, ships are forced to travel through narrow waterways known as chokepoints, like man-made canals or natural straits. As a consequence, a handful of choke points carry outsized significance for the global trade system, and the impact of disruption in said locations reverberates around the world. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of these choke points, explaining their global significance and some of the crises facing them. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. It's not hard to tell why the Panama Canal is one of the most important waterways in the world. The canal connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans and bisects the Americas, providing a shortcut for maritime traffic that would otherwise have to take the much longer and more dangerous route around South America's southernmost tip. Nearly 3% of global maritime trade transits the canal, which handles trade worth $270 billion a year. Unsurprisingly, the canal is vital to Panama's economy and delivered almost $2.5 billion into the national treasury in the 2022 fiscal year. The Panama Canal, though, is in crisis. Canal operations have been hampered by intense droughts. In fact, 2023 was one of the driest years in the Panama Canal watershed's recorded history. October, usually the peak of the rainy season, was the driest on record. The lack of rainfall has depleted to unprecedented levels. The lakes that make up a major part of the canal and provide the water that's essential to the operation of the canal and its locks. In response, canal authorities have, for the first time ever, restricted the number of daily ship crossings to 22 in December and 24 from mid-January, considerably lower than the normal rate of around 36 per day. These restrictions, alongside ship weight limits and higher transit fees, mean less trade is passing through the canal, while the queue of ships grows longer, prompting shipping companies to choose between spending millions to jump the queue, sitting and waiting their turn, or taking the longer and more expensive journey, with the disruption hitting not just Panama's treasury, but also the entire global trade system. Meanwhile, things aren't going much better for the world's other great canal. The Suez Canal, sitting at the northern end of the Red Sea, doesn't need to worry about drought, as it's a sea-level canal without any locks. However, events at the Red Sea's southernmost checkpoint, the Bab el-Mandeb, are causing trouble for the canal and its Egyptian government-owned authority, with canal shipping traffic falling 20% in the last week of December compared to a year earlier. As we've covered in videos before, Houthi rebels in Yemen have been attacking commercial vessels in the Bab el-Mandeb, aptly nicknamed the Gate of Grief, supposedly in retribution for Israel's war in Gaza. Just to highlight how important this shipping route is, before the recent escalation, 12% of global trade passed through the Red Sea, including up to 30% of container traffic, with it being a vital route, for example, for goods travelling from Asia to Europe, and the huge volumes of oil and gas being shipped from the Persian Gulf to Europe and beyond. The Houthi attacks have had a dramatic effect on shipping. According to S&P Global, the tonnage transiting the Bab el-Mandeb Strait has more than halved since the beginning of December. In early January, the International Maritime Organization said that at least 18 shipping companies had decided to reroute their vessels around South Africa, rather than risk passing through the Red Sea. Those include some of the world's biggest shipping companies like Maersk and MSC. The route around South Africa adds more than 3,000 nautical miles and roughly 10 extra days of sailing. For journeys from Shanghai to Rotterdam, a major shipping route, the freight costs have surged by nearly 150% since mid-December. Consumers may well be hit with higher prices as companies pass down the increased shipping costs, and Egypt, already short of foreign currency and enduring an economic crisis, faces a collapse in a major source of its income, as ships avoid the Red Sea and therefore the Suez Canal. Next up is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf with the Indian Ocean. With Iran to its north and the Arabian Peninsula to its south, the Strait of Hormuz is the only sea route out of the oil-rich Persian Gulf, making it the world's most important oil checkpoint in the eyes of the US Energy Information Administration. As such, an average of around 20 million barrels of oil and oil products pass through the Strait of Hormuz every day, equivalent to around 1/5 of the volume of the world's total oil consumption. The United States Navy plays a huge role in the security architecture of the region, with its Fifth Fleet stationed in Bahrain helping to ensure the free and stable flow of Gulf oil to the wider world. But any disruption to passage through the strait has the potential to massively disrupt the global economy, something seen as a real possibility, especially given the regional players. The situation in the Red Sea shows how quickly things can escalate, and there has been, over the years, a string of incidents in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, including damage to, harassment and seizure of oil tankers. The final choke point we're going to look at in detail is the Malacca Strait, a stretch of water sandwiched between the Indonesian island of Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, with Singapore at its southern tip. The strait connects the Indian Ocean in the west with the South China Sea and Pacific Ocean to the east, and as such is vital for maritime traffic travelling between East Asia, the Middle East, Africa and Europe. The numbers show just how important the strait is. An estimated $3.5 trillion of global trade passes through annually, including 1/3 of all worldwide trade, 2/3 of China's maritime trade, and 40% of Japan's. China clearly is particularly dependent on the Malacca Strait, not just to get its goods out to the world, but also for its crucial imports of Middle Eastern oil. With that in mind, China has been trying to reduce its reliance on the strait, including through initiatives like the China-Pakistan and China-Myanmar economic corridors. Nevertheless, the risk of disruption doesn't seem particularly high, especially compared to other choke points we've looked at. And even in the case of major disruption, alternate routes, for example through the Lombok Strait, are not nearly as much of a detour as previous examples in this video. So that brings us to the end, and of course there are other honourable mentions, but hopefully you understand by now just how crucial these choke points are and how significant any disruption can be, whether it's caused by extreme weather, climate change, human error or conflict. As we step into 2024, many of us are contemplating our New Year's resolutions, always looking to improve ourselves and learn more about the world around us. And while our content is always a good starting point, a lot of stuff we talk about can seem pretty complicated, especially when we dive into analytics and detailed data. But luckily there's a fun and easy way to learn more, which also doesn't cost thousands of dollars or take years and years of schooling. That's because Brilliant is the best way to learn maths, data science and computer science interactively. And the good thing is, it doesn't take long to learn either. These complex topics are broken down into small but accessible chunks, designed around your busy schedule. Even just a few minutes a day can help you with accumulating new knowledge over time in a fun and engaging way. As time goes on, you'll also get used to that empowering feeling of learning too, because Brilliant isn't just about memorization and lectures. Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning techniques to teach you the principles behind otherwise quite complex subjects, and ensuring you actually understand what's going on. So whether you want to brush up on your basic math skills, improve your employment prospects, or just have another New Year's resolution for 2024, you can check out everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days by going to brilliant.org/TLDR. Plus, the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support.